Joining me now, Dave Aronberg, former state attorney for Palm Beach County, Florida, Meghan Hays, former director of message planning in the Biden White House, and Michelle Price, Associated Press White House reporter. Welcome to you all. Dave, reaching out to you first here, because DOJ requesting the unsealing of Epstein grand jury transcripts. I mean, that is the most concrete step that the Trump administration has taken so far to try to advance a level of transparency. But will it answer questions that are still lingering about this case?
No, Alex, it's an attempt to placate the base. But even if the transcripts are released, and I doubt they will, because after all, Ghislaine Maxwell has an appeal pending before the Supreme Court, and she is urging the courts to reject the release of these documents because it could prejudice her own future cases. So I don't think they will be released. But even if they are released, the Trump administration, in their own request, has said that they will redact the names of any unindicted third-party co-conspirators. That material is what the public is demanding. That's what the base wants. They want to know the names of the unindicted co-conspirators. So even if these transcripts are released, and I doubt they will be, they're not going to give the people what they want. This matter is not going away anytime soon unless and until the Epstein files are released, and that's not happening.
Yeah. Meghan, given how things work in the White House, is it plausible that the president had no advance knowledge of the Maxwell move?
In a normal White House, in the Biden White House, the Obama White House, the Bush White House, yes, that would have been absolutely normal. The DOJ is a separate arm of the administration of the executive branch in the White House. But this administration, this is 100% normal. These people do not make a move without Donald Trump say so. Todd Blanche is Donald Trump's personal attorney who just happens to be cosplaying as the Deputy Attorney General at the Department of Justice. So this is not something that Donald Trump would have no knowledge of. He directed this.
So, Michelle, here's how President Trump responded Wednesday after Vice President Vance denied that he and others were planning an Epstein strategy session. Listen to this.
The whole thing is a hoax. It's put out by the Democrats because we've had the most successful 6 months in the history of our country. And that's just a way of trying to divert attention to something that's total bullshit.
Okay, so NBC News is reporting that the meeting did, in fact, take place at the White House Wednesday night, and Epstein was among the topics discussed. What more are you learning about that meeting?
I mean, Alex, it's hard to believe that this isn't a thing that is discussed more often than just one meeting. This has been an ongoing internal communications issue for this White House. And the message has been convoluted, and it has been a self-inflicted wound for weeks or months now. You saw the way the vice president responded this week. He was very careful in his language, saying there was no meeting scheduled specifically to talk about Epstein. There was a lot of wiggle room in that response. But we're expecting this to be an ongoing discussion here at the White House because it's still something that's being debated internally about whether to release the transcripts and the audio, potentially, of that interview that Todd Blanche did with Ghislaine Maxwell just a few weeks ago.
So, Meghan, what would your advice have been if you were a part of that Epstein strategy meeting? I mean, how can Trump dig himself out of this mess? And by the way, he thinks of himself as a marketing expert. Would he even be open to advice?
Well, it's hard to dig yourself out of something when you're so blatantly involved in it and tried to play this off as a hoax from the beginning. It's unclear to me why he let his base dig into this so much. I think that they are going to try to do everything they possibly can to turn the page. They've tried investigating Obama. Now they're doing a Russia meeting with Putin. Like, they are doing everything they can to try to turn the page. But the problem is the base, including people in Congress in the Oversight Committee, are asking people to and subpoenaing people to come testify. So this is just going to drag out longer. Those people are coming up to testify in October. This is months more of this just trickling out drip by drip. The best thing to have been is not do the big press conference at the beginning with those binders when they all stood there, and not to release a letter saying there were no files.
So, Dave, ABC News reports that Maxwell said nothing during her meeting with Todd Blanche that would be harmful to President Trump, adding the conversations were recorded and the administration is considering releasing transcripts. So what does this suggest to you? I mean, you thought the grand jury transcripts would never be released. How about these?
Oh, no, I think this will be released, at least in part, because it helps the president. The reason why they had this private meeting between the #2 person at the DOJ and a convicted sex trafficker was because they wanted information about Democrats who were involved, and they wanted information that would exonerate Donald Trump. And it looks like Ghislaine Maxwell is playing ball. How do I know? Well, she got sent to a minimum security prison, a club fed, right after the interview. And there's a possibility of a pardon down the road. So they want this information out there. But again, that information, just like the grand jury transcripts, are not going to satisfy the ravenous base who have been promised that there's an Epstein list and there's an Epstein file, and so far have received neither.
You know, to that transfer point, Meghan, how unusual is it that more than a week after Maxwell was moved, the White House has not provided details of who approved it, how she was moved, why she was moved? How unusual is that?
I mean, listening to the experts that deal with the Department of Prisons and the Bureau of Prisons, excuse me, I think that it's probably very unusual. I just don't think that these things are made public because you don't have someone this high profile. You also know that people who are accused and convicted of sex offenses do not get to move to a minimum security prison where people are, it's very white collar crime. This is not something that most people would have the benefit of getting. So I don't necessarily know that we've ever been in a situation like this to have it be unusual. I think the whole thing from start to finish and moving her is unusual because this is not something where these types of criminals go.
Michelle, has the White House ever addressed the survivors?
No, they have not. And it's something that the president has made clear he doesn't like talking about. You know, every time this is brought up, he often lashes out at the reporter who asked the question, saying, why are you still talking about it? The only time it has even sort of come up was when the president was questioned about his comments that he ended his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein because he said that Jeffrey Epstein took some of his employees, in his words, he said stole them. And one of those employees, according to the president, was Virginia Giuffre, who is one of the victims of Jeffrey Epstein. But the president over and over has said that he had no advance knowledge of Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. So far, this is a thing that the White House has not wanted to speak about.
Well, Meghan, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley is pushing for a public hearing of the Oversight Committee to give survivors the opportunity to provide testimony if they wish to do so, saying, quote, if we are to hold powerful people to account, our investigation must center the voices they tried to silence. So the White House, can it force the White House to be more responsive to survivor perspectives now?
I don't think so. I think that you see a lot of survivors out in the media. I think you should see survivors if they would like to testify in front of Congress. If the Oversight Committee is hearing, is subpoenaing people, they should also be allowed to give their testimony. At the center of this is a sex trafficking ring, and there are hundreds of victims. And I think we lose sight of that sometimes in the political back and forth. And I think that's the one thing that we cannot lose sight about. So I would ask reporters to keep asking the president about these survivors, because at the core of this is that it is them, and they are the ones that matter the most.
Last question quickly to you, Dave, because House Oversight Chair James Comer this week subpoenaed DOJ for the Epstein files, also subpoenaed documents from a list of high-profile figures, including Bill and Hillary Clinton, former attorneys general, but notably not Alex Acosta, Trump's former Secretary of Labor, who resigned in July 2019 when he felt Epstein had become a distraction for the first Trump presidency. What light can Acosta shed on this case?
Everything. I mean, the whole non-prosecution agreement was signed by Alex Acosta. The fact that Epstein didn't serve any time in federal prison, the feds came in and they reached a deal with Epstein to have him serve some time in local facilities, state facilities, pleading guilty to state charges. I've never heard of that, where the feds come in and they do a plea deal to plead guilty to state, not federal charges. So there's a lot of unanswered questions. It just shows that James Comer's list is not a serious one. That's why he didn't include Acosta. That's why he didn't include Trump. That's why he didn't include victims. But instead, he has Hillary Clinton and James Comey and Robert Mueller. It's as if he took a list of Trump's enemies and threw darts at it to decide who to subpoena. The whole thing is just reeks of politics.